Hello, my name is Andy and I am the Village Idiot. I'm armed with a car and a GoPro and an unhealthy amount of time on my hands. I'm using that time to attempt to visit every civil parish in England. You're watching the East Riding of Yorkshire series. Together with the unparished city of Hull, it forms the county of the same name. There's 172 parishes here. Which one are we in today? Hello out there in the East Riding of Yorkshire. It is a brand new year, it's 2024 now, and this year this county will come to an end. There are 41 still to go, and the first of those 41 is this one here, which I know a lot of people have been looking forward to. Nice little lengthy walk around this one to begin the East Riding for the new year. Welcome to Patrington. Here's my disclaimer for people who may be watching me for the first time. I say things as I would in my native accent and dialect. As a result, I may not pronounce things in the same way as the locals do. Remember, I'm a visitor. It's impossible to know everything. Leave me a comment, spin me a like and bash that subscribe button. Let's get to today's parish video. Patrington, Patrick's town. Happy New Year, folks of the East Riding. Kicking off the 4th year in this glorious county, we have Patrington, and this is easily one of the most anticipated episodes I've ever done. With the exception of Roos, Patrington is the village in Holderness that most people know the best because of its location on the road between Withernsea and Hull. At its centre is the tall spire of St Patrick's Church, built as the precursor to York Minster, from which the village gets its name. The parish also contains Patrington Haven, which has an old RAF radar station, and Winestead, with a church of its own. The area was held by the ancient Hildyard family, who lend their name to one of the local pubs. The central square of shops, known as the marketplace, are often used by tourists passing through the village going towards the coast. That said, they're well used by the locals too. And speaking of the locals, you won't find another community quite like this one. Several generations of the same families have made Patrington what it is today. Everybody seems to know everybody in this place, and there's a real close-knit feel to it. So, with the walking boots on, in the patchy rain, let's tackle one of the greatest villages, now there's a term I don't use often, in the East Riding of Yorkshire. We start with a drive through Winestead, a small linear village to the west of Patrington, just off the road to Ottringham. Until 1935, Winestead was its own parish. That's when it was abolished and merged with Patrington to form the modern boundaries. Winestead has had at least two famous former residents, the cricketer Henry Meister and the MP, satirist and poet Andrew Marvell, born here in 1621. Winestead, together with Patrington, was the seat of the ancient Hildyard family, whose name had several spellings, such as Hildyard or Hildegardis. Their lineage can be traced back to Anglo-Saxon times. They became extinct in 1814 after the death of Baronet Sir Robert Darcy Hildyard. The Hildyard family lived in Winestead for 10 generations, and even after the death of the last baronet, the heirs, who we'll meet in a forthcoming Nottinghamshire village, continued to own Winestead Hall. Most of the village is laid out along one narrow road, but the church stands away from it all on its own off the road into Patrington, and that is where we are now. Dedicated to St Germain, Winestead's church was designated a Grade 1 listed building in 1966. It stands in an isolated position within a ring of trees. When it was built, it was much closer to the Humber than it is today, but land reclamation means it's now more than 5 kilometres from the coastline. You'll note straight away that this one has no tower. It has a nave, a chancel, a rebuilt south aisle, and a south chapel which is now used as a vestry. Inside you'll find a late medieval interior. The current building was designed by the architect, Temple Moore. A church at Winstead was first mentioned in the 13th century. It's likely there was an even earlier church here too, given the dedication, as it suggests an early Christian settlement was established here soon after Germain's visit to Britain in the 5th century. The churchyard has some massive graves and tombs, as well as a Celtic cross memorialising all those who were lost in World War I. This isn't the only war memorial you'll come across here either, because outside the gate is a second. This one is a tablet, which lists the names of all those who served and returned, as well as those who died. Leaving the church behind, we're now driving into Patrington along Station Road. As the name suggests, there was a station close by. In fact, there were two, one at Winestead and one further down the road at Patrington. Both were on the Hull and Holderness Railway, which we last met a long time ago now in Withernsea, where we saw its former terminus. Both stations opened in June 1854. Winstead's would close to passengers 50 years later in 1904 and to freight in 1956, but Patrington's would continue to serve passengers until 1964. Part of the former railway line has now been turned into a walking trail between Winstead and Hull, and we've seen that before, most notably in Burstwick. Both station buildings still stand. Winstead's is a private house, whilst Patrington's is now used by a local business. It's located behind one of the village's pubs, the Station Hotel, which we're approaching here. This is a family-owned free house, previously used as a stopping-off point for railway passengers. It's now a gastropub, which has a function room often used for wedding parties. It even has its own fully self-contained marquee-style wedding area with its own bar, toilets and kitchen that can cater for over 100 people. And so to the station building itself, which is directly behind the pub. The station and the station master's house are now used as an office by the Holderness Metal Company, or HMC for short. The platforms have been demolished and the station yard was turned into a scrapyard and a skip site. The walking trail does not pass through this area and it's strictly private. Now, before we start walking around Patrington Village, note the houses on the left here as we continue down Station Road. In the garden of one of them is an aeroplane. Here's a picture of it from the overhead shot on Google Maps. It's owned by a man named Colin who runs Patrington Garage. It's a Vampire jet fighter, a DH Vampire T11 to be exact. It's certainly not the kind of thing you'd expect to find in someone's garden. I've included a link below where you can see a better image of the plane too. Fascinating. We start our main walk at the Dunedin Hotel Spa and Restaurant, which bills itself as Yorkshire's little secret. A former country house, Dunedin has 11 bedrooms and 2 self-catering lodges. It also has a full civil ceremony licence, so you can legally get married here too. It stands at the end of Station Road where it meets Westgate. By now, we're used to what a typical main street in an East Riding village looks like. Take everything you already know and throw it all together here, because Patrington has it all. And it's beautiful to boot. Patrington is a hidden gem that offers a unique blend of history, culture and natural beauty. It was historically a market town from the 12th century onwards. The village is mentioned in the Domesday Book as Patricktone, literally Patrick's Town. It was part of the Holderness Wapentake, a historical division of Yorkshire. The modern village has a population of around 2,000 people and it's always been a central hub for much of Holderness. It is of course served by a bus, the X7 East Rider, which connects Hull with Withernsea on the Holderness coast. There are several facilities here which you wouldn't find in a typical East Riding village. Vets like this one, for example, have not been a regular feature in this series. The area we're coming into here was the marketplace a long time ago. The square is still a local landmark, and it's there where we find Patrington's War Memorial, this one a square monolith with an orb atop each of its 4 corners. Listed upon it are 109 names, of which 88 served and returned. This is a rare memorial too because it was unveiled in 1917, one of very few to be so before World War I ended. This next thing is a board which tells us about hidden Holderness. As we already know, lots of the Holderness coast has been lost to the sea. This gives us an insight into just how much has been lost thanks to coastal erosion. 22 villages have been lost to the North Sea and the Humber since Roman times. The board also goes on to tell you about shipwrecks on the coast too. There have been around 530 recorded from Tunstall to Spurn Point. The board is an interesting read and it can be found on the wall of a public toilet block next to the War Memorial. Around the back of the block is an old surgery. Patrington has a modern surgery too, which we'll encounter later on. We've now hit North Side and this has a few gorgeous buildings. Take the Manor House for example, built in 1743 according to a stone above its door. It's one of 38 listed buildings in the parish. Next door is the local fire station. This was established in 1959 and it's the main station that serves the Holderness coast. It's located on the northern edge of the village and it's crewed by on-call firefighters only. Look to the right halfway up North Side and you'll catch Patrington Garage on Pump Row. It's an important landmark because it sells fuel, which a lot of travellers need on the way to and from the coast. We'll not talk much about the prices though, that's a different story. Let's continue up North Side and on the right again we find North Side Court, a modern block of housing backing on to the garage. I thought it to be worthy of inclusion, so check out this ivy covered house on the other side of the road as we continue to head north. Soon the road bends towards Withernsea, so we're off down Tithe Barn Lane, likely named because there was one here at one point. There are no listed buildings on this road, but this does give us our first look at the tall spire of the church, seen peeking over the houses. This building with the timber frame is called Bleak House. Since 1985 it's been a residential care home for adults with a learning disability. It was founded by Sheila Turley, a mental health nurse and former ward sister at Winestead Hospital. And now we come to the church. Dedicated to St Patrick, it's this building which lends its name to the village it stands in. The largest of all the churches in the area, this has a nickname. It's known by many as the Queen of Holderness. Grade 1 listed, this is a fine example of a church built during the decorated period of Gothic architecture. It was the precursor to York Minster, as it was built by the very same architects and stonemasons. It's mainly 13th century, although fragments of an earlier church remain here. Its tall spire rises to a height of 175 feet. Well, make no mistake about it, this is a cavernous church. It's one of the biggest we've seen in the East Riding so far. Let's head into the chancel and have a little wander around here. Lovely Christmas tree just in front of the altar here. Check this out. Of course, it's pre-Christmas before I'm recording this one. This, of course, is out in the new year, so Happy New Year, everybody. But yeah, I've done well with the Christmas tree there. Quite like that. Check this out. Look at this. Isn't that just stunning? With the window and the gold plating underneath. I assume it's gold plating. Whatever it is. It's beautiful. Very, very tall chancel ceiling. You can see it's a long way up there. Got a couple of tablets on the wall. There's one over here. Let's have a look and see what this is about. The Reverend Richard Henry Kitchingman, 18 years rector of this parish, who died in 1857, aged 68. Let's have a wander down here. Here's the rood screen. Is there actually some glass in this screen? It looks to be some, oh no, it's not glass, it just looks like glass. It's not though. Step down. There's a side chapel here. Let's wander into this side chapel. See what we've got here. In this corner, got like a secondary altar almost, haven't we? Just there. Some nice stained glass there. Let's come around here. Oh, what's this in this corner? Is this like a paper Christmas? Oh no, wait a minute, what's this? Let's see. Please feel free to write the name of a loved one on a card and put it on the tree. Okay, let's have a look and see what people have written. Oh, so it's like a memory tree. This one's for someone's mum, from Lisa. Let's have a look at this one. In loving memory of Nana. That pink one there. What have we got down here? Marjorie Hutton. Let's see. Miss you loads. God bless Mum. Yeah, it's a memory tree. That's nice, isn't it? Good thing to have at Christmas as well. Right. Let's have a quick look down here before we leave the church. Got a list of benefactors here, look. Going back to 1595, when John Thorgett left 5, is that shillings? I think it's shillings, or is it £5 yearly forever charged on his house and garth at Patrington, surrendered to Thomas Tock to be paid to the church wardens and by them distributed amongst the poor on the 2nd day of November. And then it goes all the way up to 1964, where it mentions a D.A. Fewster, who bequeathed £100 to be invested for the church restoration fund. So this is definitely a church that's been looked after over the centuries, isn't it? And it's wonderful. Easily Patrington's best feature, if you ask me. You see that spire for miles around. Right, let's head on out of the church and continue walking. The church is apparently a favourite with our current king, Charles III. He's been known to visit this on occasion when he's in the area. I wonder if he's ever explored Patrington village. Our route will now take us around the church and back onto Eastgate as we start to venture towards the eastern end of the place along the road to Welwick. It was down here once upon a century or two ago that you'd have found Patrington's police station. It still stands, and it's on the corner of Hompton Road. This is it. It's now the base of an Irish folk band, according to Google. Nearby we have a parish notice board, so let's get that job out of the way while we're here. 40 left in the East Riding. Our next landmark is an old hospital. It was named Linsdall's and it was built and endowed in 1843. Essentially, it was a row of almshouses, not a hospital. It was founded by a Miss Linsdall of Winestead for 4 poor widows. These days, it's been turned into private residences. Over the road is a much more modern block of residences, Singleton Court, a retirement complex run by a local housing association. The road starts to bend towards Welwick now, and up next is the playing field and playground right on the edge of civilization. This stretches for a long way back there. It has several football pitches, a decent sized open green space and an extensive playground, enough to keep all the younger ones happy. Looking towards Welwick, if you squint you might be able to see the remains of a windmill. It was a tower mill which has long since lost its cap and sails. There was also one at Patrington Haven many moons ago too. Next, it's Southside, and we're off to the cricket club. Known as the Southside Ground, this is where Patrington Cricket Club have played for many years. The club was founded in 1850 and they're currently members of the York and District Senior Cricket League. I was loving the quintessential village feel here with the spire of St Patrick's overlooking the ground. Right across the road we have a school. Patrington's C of E Primary Academy is a modern building, but education in the village can be traced back to at least 1855 when a national school made of red brick was built here. Speaking of things made of red brick, now we're making our way towards the village centre via Greenshaw Lane. This is a typical East Riding street consisting of terraced cottages mainly, with front doors leading out onto the narrow road they stand on. Greenshaw Lane was the location of both of Patrington's Methodist chapels, one for the Wesleyans and one for the Primitives. What remains of the Primitive chapel can be seen shortly. Now some kind of garage, this once had an upper floor. The village hall is down the street to the left of it. Next to pass is the current Methodist chapel. This is a brick building painted in an attractive light blue and white. It was originally the Wesleyan chapel and it dates from 1811. Patrington still has a primitive chapel, but it's unlike any other we've ever seen. More on that later. A few steps away is the Patrington Recreation Club. Established in 1928, this has 2 full-size snooker tables which have recently been reclothed. The room works in conjunction with the playing fields, and the 2 have their own joint Facebook page. Onto the high street now. Let's talk pubs because there are 2 in close proximity. First up is the Wolfpack, which used to be called the Holderness Inn. Although the building is listed, that's due to its architectural qualities and not its historic ones. The second of the 2 pubs here, though, upholds some of the local history by way of its name. This is the Hildyard Arms, named after the family, and its signboard bears their crest. It's an old traditional pub which is now in part an Italian restaurant, but it still caters for drinkers in all 3 of its rooms. Now, because very few people choose to use the road through Roos to get to Withernsea unless they're lost, Patrington is often used by tourists on their way to the East Yorkshire coast. It's something of a handy stop-off point. Passing trade means that the village centre is absolutely thriving. As well as the pubs, it has several award-winning shops, including a butcher's, bakeries, a chippy, a pharmacy, hair and beauty salons, gift shops and cafes. It's all here. One establishment, Cakey Bakey Yum Yum, was of particular interest to me. Now, when this walk around is finished later, I'll be coming back to this shop right here, Cakey Bakey Yum Yum Cake Shop and Tea Room, because the very kind people here have put a £5 behind the counter for me, which means I can get anything to that sort of value before I go to the next one. I'm going to need it as well, you'll see why next week. Now, this is the point where I enlisted a little bit of help from a local. The shop that's opposite Cakey Bakey Yum Yum, the soap shop, is going to help me with this street here, St Patrick's Green. This is all retirement housing. If you have a look, sheltered housing, and it's also got the modern surgery behind that tree over there. That's actually on the Crescent, faces the Crescent, little side street off St Patrick's Green. Now, this is a dead end in this corner over here, and I looked for ages and ages for a way through onto a street called Saffron Garth, which is on the other side of these houses. There isn't a way, really. There's a big fence which I did sort of ask if I could potentially climb over, but nobody seemed very happy about that. I can understand why. However, there is in that corner over there a gate which is about to be opened for me, and it leads onto a drive off Greenshaw Lane, and that will then take us around in a big circle, which means I can then come back this way past Saffron Garth and up to Ings Lane and Humber Lane to complete the route. All I've got to do is wait for this lady to come and open the gate for me. St Patrick's Green is a sheltered housing complex which was built in 1963. It comprises 20 bungalows, each with 1 bedroom, and it caters for residents aged 60 or older. Saffron Garth behind this is a much newer street that was built over a track between Greenshaw Lane and Humber Lane. 2 spurs of that former lane still exist, and I was able to use one of them thanks to the generosity of the local lady who opened that gate for me. It meant I could return to Southside with just a couple more streets to cover before ending up back at the car. This here is Saffron Garth. The same lady told me in conversation that her family owned the land in this part of Patrington for several generations. At one time, there was a pig farm here, and it was where many local lads came for work. It looks a bit different now. If you look the other way at this point, you have a view over some fields towards Patrington Haven. We'll be heading down there in a short while. The hamlet has a completely different history, and you'll want to stick around for it. Next, we're off to Humber Lane. These last 2 streets are generally residential affairs. Humber Lane is almost entirely, save for a BT telephone exchange which kind of breaks up the flow, if you know what I mean. This was built in 1973 and serves Hompton, Patrington, Patrington Haven, Welwick and Winestead. Halfway down the street is a junction with Ings Lane, although upon turning left you're initially looking at Westfield, which is a cul-de-sac off it. It's just that some of the houses face Ings Lane. This forms a neat little loop back to the start. The other side of the road is a mishmash of housing styles. Clearly there's been some infilling here over the years. After the road bends sharply right, it becomes a tight, narrow road similar to Greenshaw Lane. These brick terraces lead us to our final landmark, a chapel like none other ever seen before. Patrington's original primitive Methodist chapel was erected in 1841 and later rebuilt in 1862. Later though, when its congregation were not in favour of a unification, this building was erected for the continuing primitive Methodists in 1932. Okay, so here we are back to the beginning, and I just want to show you a couple of things before we move on to the next part, because there is another few more bits to this yet. The lady who let me through the gate owns the soap shop, Soapy Bubbles and Polaris Printing Limited. There's a card there, some details on the back, don't know whether you can read them, but yeah, that was very helpful of her to let me through that gate. It completed the route nicely, otherwise I would have had to come back through the marketplace and sort of not really do this area, you know, Ings Lane, Humber Lane. It would have just sort of not got done. The other thing I want to show you is I got a Christmas card from somebody who'd been obviously watching my stuff before. I am going to open this, even though it says to Andy and Nikki, because to be fair, you know, it can be reopened again later when I get back home and I can show Nikki and the girls it. Let's have a look then, shall we? Open her up. There we go. Nice little snowy scene there, like cottage. Let's have a little look. It says to Andy, Nikki, girls and pets, obviously meaning Angel. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year from Mary and Tracy in Patrington. Isn't that nice? Isn't that fantastic? It's great when you find people around who are like that. It's just heartful. It's really heartwarming. It's fantastic. So yeah, thank you very much for the card. That will go up in our house before Christmas. Of course, it's after Christmas that you're watching this episode, but you know, it's the way it goes at this time of year. Okay, so now we're going to go to a smaller settlement which is to the south of Patrington. It's called Patrington Haven, and really it's only got one thing, and that's a caravan park. Patrington Haven has a little bit more than just a caravan park in truth. For starters, here's its pub named the Burns Head Inn. It stands opposite the village green and a pond behind the fence to the right. This one has some musical history. It was visited in 1963 by none other than the Beatles, who called in before playing a gig in Hull. Patrington Haven was once used by the RAF, although that's not a well-known fact to the average tourist. It was a radar station and it stood where the 5-star award-winning Patrington Haven Leisure Park is today. This was established in 1985. In 2013, a memorial sculpture to the RAF station was unveiled at this site. RAF Patrington, as it was known, was built during World War II. Although it closed in 1955, being replaced by RAF Hompton during the Cold War, the site was still used to house military personnel until the mid-1970s. Some of the buildings of the old technical site survive today. Here's how the modern Patrington Haven village looks in terms of residences. It's based around Bursell Square and Turmar Road. These have a one-way system that surrounds a central playground. The caravan site backs onto this to the west, whilst Main Street, the village green and the pub are all to the east. So why is this called Patrington Haven? It's not on the coast. Well, it used to be. Running along the southern edge of the village is Winestead Drain, which was historically a northern channel of the Humber estuary. As such, the village used to be called Havenside. The drain now forms the northern boundary with Sunk Island, and you might remember it from that episode. It used to be navigable by boat, and the village had a port. It closed in 1869 when the drain had silted up to the point where navigation was no longer possible. And as if all that wasn't enough, there's one last thing to show you here in Patrington. This little block of bricks, which looks very nondescript, but this is extremely important. Take a look at this on top of it. Greenwich Meridian passes right through Patrington. There you see, Patrington is marked on this little map. This was placed here in 2000 for the millennium. And this is the point where west is one way and east is the other. And this, according to the lady who runs the soap shop that we talked about earlier, this is the official point where everywhere in the world is based around. It's this here. this point. Nowhere else. It's not in Greenwich in London, apparently it's here. This spot. I know we've mentioned it before in the East Riding because it passes through Sunk Island, it passes through Tunstall, if you remember that in the Roos episode, but it's here. This little brick structure here, which every place in the world is measured from this point right here. How about that? Claim to fame for Patrington. I love the place. Can't get enough of it. Can't get enough of it. But it's time to move on to the next one. And with that, we're off to the next one. There are only 2 left on the Holderness coast, and next week we'll be taking a trip right to the East Riding's answer to Land's End. Join me in 7 days' time when I attempt to do something not a lot of people would dare to do in the winter: cycle down Spurn Point. See you later. Thanks for watching this video, folks. Don't forget to like this episode if you haven't already. It really makes a difference with YouTube. If you're new here, subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us a share too if you've got friends who'd like it. You can find all the links to my social media accounts below, as well as my Buy Me a Coffee page where you can donate to the channel. Also, if you've enjoyed this episode, have a look at some more videos in this series. Until next time, I've been Andy, also known as the Village Idiot, and I'm out.